Hey guys and girls, welcome back to another video. I just wanted to spend some time looking at this whole China issue. So we've heard a lot of things around the China big tech crackdown. We've heard a lot of things about the gaming thing that happened recently. But what does this mean? What's going on? Let's take a look. So now, the best way to look at this, and this has not happened overnight, this whole crackdown, this has been happening over a number of years, but let's try to bucket it into three key categories. The first one, I'd say, is antitrust. So this is your competition laws as you used to in the States, your antitrust laws, and here in the UK, it's your CMA, your competitions and mergers. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So this antitrust laws is around, it's very normal in most countries to say, look, we don't want any single massive company taking control of any industry, right? So if somebody gets too big, we need to make sure there's fair competition practices. There's no predatory pricing going on. No large companies throwing their weight about and just acquiring all the other companies that are of any size. Does that remind you of any companies in the States? Facebook. Now, who are the victims of this? So let's have a look. So the first one here we have is Alibaba. They were fined $2.8 billion in April. I mean, let's put this into perspective, right? You remember all the uproar about Robinhood? Yeah, they got a $70 million fine by FINRA, which, by the way, was the biggest fine ever. Alibaba got fined $2.8 billion for competition, okay, for being anti-competitive. At the same time, what happened after Alibaba got fined, 34 tech firms were called in to sit with the government to rectify antitrust practices. Now, this included companies such as Tencent in the gaming space, ByteDance, who is social media, JD from the e-com space, and New Oriental Education from the for-profit education space. And now, they all rectified these issues, but subsequently they were fined anyway. Okay, so this is how things go over there. Now, the law was actually mandated back in 2008, but China only started to enforce this toward the back end of 2020. Now, the question arises, I mean, there's nothing eminently wrong about having an antitrust practice or laws and to make sure that you're regulating them. So what's the issue here then? Why the fuss? Why the media fuss here in the Western world? Well, maybe it's because China's actually done something which the West hasn't been able to do. Could that be the reason? I mean, you look at the likes of Facebook, you look at the likes of Google, you look at the likes of Microsoft. Have these companies been enforced on antitrust laws? Have the government got any power in these countries, in the States, to do such a thing, to put a $2.8 billion fine on their door? Or do we just get these smaller fines as token gestures to say, look, we're making sure that they're playing ball? I mean, this is the key here, right? But if China's actually going and fining their biggest success story, Alibaba, for $2.8 billion, doesn't that set out a statement that, look, we're going to make sure these antitrust laws are in place? So that's interesting around the antitrust. I don't see anything eminently wrong about that. But the next point here is your data security. Again, on the face value, this is a very important point, and it's something all regulators will be looking to have on their agenda, right? You need to make sure that citizens' data is protected. And this is overseen by Cyberspace Administration of China, CAC, which was formed in 2014. Now, a lot of people are saying that, look, these are the guys who look after a lot of the propaganda, they do a lot of the social scoring and things like that, and therefore maybe they have a few extra agendas. Well, they say that the aim is to ensure citizen data collected does not leave China. So what they don't want is a company like Alibaba or Tencent or any of these other companies like DiDi collecting Chinese citizen data and then misappropriating that across the borders. One from a defense point of view and surveillance point of view and intelligence point of view, but also just to protect their citizens. And I think that, I think there's nothing wrong with that. Again, from a defense point of view, we'd want that from our countries. And from a citizen point of view, we've been screaming about that from our countries. But yet, when we're using Facebook, when we're using Twitter, when we're using WhatsApp and these Instagrams and Microsoft products, Apple products, do we know where our data is really going? How do we have any insurance that that's not going abroad? In fact, we know it is. So the biggest victim of this was the DiDi ride-hailing app. And this came into the news just a couple of days ago, on July 2nd, 2 days after their IPO in America, China banned the DiDi ride-hailing app, which, by the way, Uber owns a stake in, from listing on the app stores in China. Massive. That's a massive thing to do. And look, it's not the first time. If you remember when Tesla went into the market, they were banned. Their cars were banned from the military zones because the China government said, we're not comfortable with what you're doing with the data. How do we know you're not recording these military zones? Again, sounds fair enough. And Tesla said, look, we would not store the data abroad. It'll be stored domestically. Okay, so that's your data security side of things. Now, the third and final section we have is disorderly expansion. Okay, this is the phrase they use, and if you actually translate the Mandarin, the translation for it is growth at the expense of public interest. So what they're saying in essence is we're not going to allow companies to grow at any expense. So almost what they're putting their foot down and saying is capitalism is fine. You could, but with some really strict and sometimes inconsistent guardrails. That's almost what they're saying here. Is we're going to put some rules in place, and you can't just achieve at any cost. You kind of create billion-dollar companies. These companies are testament to that in China. But it's not going to be easy, and you have to abide by our rules. It's not just do what you want and you become bigger than the government. And so they said you cannot do things which go against the interest of the public. And again, we expect these from our regulators. I mean, if you've seen my video posted around the cryptocurrency space, we expect that from Gary Gensler at the SEC. We expect that from the FCA here in the UK. Right? So it's no different here in China. You'd expect them to crack down on these companies if they're doing things wrong. But where we're struggling are the inconsistencies, the way they're doing it, how sudden it is, the impact to do that to DiDi 2 days after an IPO. It seems a little suspicious that they're trying to screw the Western investors, right? It doesn't look good. Now, they suspended the IPO of the fintech Ant Group. They had a crackdown on ByteDance, July 24th. Not long ago, they did a full ban on all for-profit education. They're saying that you shouldn't be profiting on the education of minors. It should be a service. And therefore, they felt that by putting that in the capitalistic realm, there would be conflicting objectives. And finally, the crackdown on gaming, which came into the news last night, which is what prompted me to kind of take a deeper dive into this whole Chinese space and what's going on. The gaming space the issue's been going on for a while with Tencent. I mean, let's see if we can get this up. Now, let's have a look at this. So, China's Tencent tightens games controls for children after state media attack. Tencent, the Chinese tech giant, has announced it will curb the time children spend playing its flagship counter game after its shares were sent into a tailspin. And the reason for this, if you saw the news, was the state media came out and said that they said a whole bunch of damning things about the gaming space, but they said it's spiritual opium, which is very strong language. And in a social media post, Tencent announced a range of new measures after it said relevant authorities had requested greater protection of minors in gaming and for firms to carry out their societal responsibilities. So again, coming back to the growth at the expense of public interest. Let kids play games, but not for 20 hours a day like we sometimes see here in the Western world. But again, to what extent should the government be intervening with our lives? That's the difference between our ideologies and what we see on that side in China. Hours earlier, an article in the Economic Information Daily, which is affiliated with China's biggest state agencies, compared digital games with electronic drugs and called for more restrictions on the industry to prevent widespread addiction amongst children. Okay, the article wiped, $60 billion, 11% of Tencent's market capitalization, as investors feared that gaming would become the latest target of a regulatory crackdown. Okay, so look, and this is not the first time. Tencent has done this years ago. I can't remember what the date was, but they had to put some restrictions in place on the gaming. I think, what is it now? What does it say in this article? Let's see how long kids can play. I think they're allowed to play like a few hours, and after a certain time there's a curfew and they can't play after a certain time. It responded. This is what we spoke about. 2.8 billion Alibaba in the Antitrust claims. So look, that's the Chinese market. That's where we're at. Those are the three buckets they're focused on, which on a macro level there's nothing wrong with them, right? And to have antitrust laws are fine. To protect your citizens' data is fine, and to prevent disorderly expansion are fine. These are all things we come to expect of our government. I think there's just some inconsistencies and imbalance in the way we're seeing this enforced. So there you go. That's my 2 cent, not 10 cent. Let's see what I did there on the Chinese space. If you found that helpful, please don't forget to comment below and let me know what you want to see in the next videos, and we'll see you in the next one.